Alright guys, so today I'm going to explain the differences between how a baby learns a language and how an adult learns a language. So, I think most people understand that, maybe babies learn languages easier, right? That's common knowledge. But why? We have to kind of dive deeper into that. Like how come babies are able to learn languages faster and how come adults it's not as easy for us, right? Now, the main difference is just the difference in our deliberate practice when it comes to learning a language. So, with a baby, right, you have to keep in mind that a baby's brain is extremely malleable, right? Which means that because it's born into this world, right, it tries to soak up everything. So, like, you have to think about it like this: like, when you're a kid and you're a baby, like, your brain tries to soak up and process every information in the universe, right? Because it's like born and it doesn't know what anything is, right? So you know, a baby doesn't have to be actively listening to French or actively listening to Japanese. If you're to basically put anime in the background, right? And the baby doesn't, and the baby could be like literally playing on it, like playing with his toys, right? And you can put anime in the background, and literally, bro, this baby will be able to speak and understand fluent Japanese without even trying to pay attention, like without even trying. Like the baby will be able to understand Japanese to a certain extent, even if he's not paying attention to the anime, even if he's just just playing with his toys. And this is the main difference between a baby's way of learning languages and an adult. The thing is, guys, like we still have the same language acquisition device in our brains as adults. We still have the same device that a child does, right? Now, the difference between our brains and their brains is that our brains have become more filtered and rigid, right? What does this mean? Well, you have to keep in mind that when you're an adult, right, in order to basically protect our brains, right, our brains filter out unnecessary information. So, for example, if you were to like read a book, right, in a coffee shop, and you were like, everyone's like speaking, it's like loud, like everyone's talking, but in order for you to focus on the book, you basically tune out the sounds from the outside, right? So your subconscious brain is filtering out the unnecessary information and it's not decoding it, right? And it's just in your conscious brain is just solely focused on the book. But if someone were to call out your name, right, out of those background noise, you'll be able to notice it. It's because your subconscious brain has filtered out the noise from the back. But because someone called your name, your subconscious brain deemed this sound effect, which is your name, as worthy. So it projected this up to consciousness. So now you start noticing it, right? And you're like, oh, like someone called my name, right? So our brains as adults, we filter out everything, right? So if you're to just like put on Chinese in the background, or even like listen to Chinese, like with your podcast or with the headphones, without really like deliberately trying to engage in it, you're not going to get fluent in Chinese, whereas a baby will. That's the difference, right? A baby doesn't have to try to understand Chinese, right? The baby will just end up soaking up everything about the language without consciously putting in deliberate practice. But an adult will need to put deliberate practice. Will need to actually sit down and actually engage with the language. And what I mean by engage, I mean by immersing in content. So basically, either you listen to when people speak to you, or you basically actively listen to Chinese people speak with each other, or you basically watch like dramas or animes, right, and try to understand the plot. That's an example of deliberate practice in a language in order to acquire language as an adult. So when it comes to learning language as an adult, guys, like you're going to have to deliberately engage in practice in order to tell your subconscious brain that this is relevant, right? Because here's the thing, like our brains filter out everything, right? Because it filters out everything so that we can become better with our own native language. You know what I mean? Like this is the purpose behind it. Because the baby is born with no language that this person is aware of, the baby's brain tries to soak up every language that's around them. And then once they've learned all the language that's around them, they basically, once they become a teenager or an adult, the brain solidifies and filters out everything else, right? And just focuses on ameliorating and improving the language that it knows. So this is the purpose behind our brain's ability to filter out information in language, right? As we continue to grow towards adults, because you have to keep in mind that, like, it's actually in order to improve the languages we know in like as a native, right? So if you grew up in like an English country, like your brain will filter out Chinese, it'll filter out French, it'll filter out any unnecessary information in English because it's trying to improve English, right? Because that's the only language that it's been immersed to. So it's going to try to be more efficient. Your brain's finding ways to be more efficient with this. You know, it's actually a feature. Like people think this is a curse, but this is actually a feature. Like it's very convenient for an adult's brain to filter out any unnecessary information, right? So that's how that's the difference, right? Like if I were to basically just listen to Chinese passively without really actively engaging in it, I would never get fluent in Chinese, right? Because my brain would filter it out. Whereas if I was a baby, maybe if I was 2 years old, or maybe even 5, I would be able to pick up on some Chinese without even engaging in it. That's the difference between if I was a baby and if I was an adult. That's the only difference, right? So if I want to tell my brain that this is relevant information and that this language is actually worthy of learning, you're going to have to actively engage in it and actually, tell your subconscious brain that this is an important language to learn. So that's the difference between a baby's way of learning a language and an adult's way of learning language. We just have to engage in it more. Whereas a baby doesn't really necessarily have to engage, and the baby will get fluent. So, and you have to keep in mind that it's because the baby needs to absorb every information in the universe, right? Because it just got born and it's trying to process stuff, right? So, yeah, guys, you're going to have to treat language learning as kind of learning a skill. You're going to have to deliberately engage in deliberate practice, right? In order to learn language as an adult. So that's the only, disadvantage as adults. But generally speaking, we actually learn languages faster as adults because we don't necessarily need to learn the concept of a dog. We don't need to learn the concept of food, rice, or we don't need to learn the concept of certain things because we already know that in our native language. So it's very quick to learn, whereas a baby has to learn the entire concept of a dog, of a cat. You know what I mean? Whereas we don't. So I actually think that we actually learn languages a little bit faster, but we just need to put more effort in order to kickstart the subconscious decoding of language in order for us to be able to speak and understand language. So we just have to kickstart it by doing deliberate practice, whereas the baby doesn't. So, if I had a child, I would just put on anime in the background, right, for the baby to listen to, right? And without trying, the baby will start to speak fluent Japanese without even trying. I don't even have to speak to him, bro. I could just put anime in the background and the baby could just passively just watch the show, watch the anime, and this guy would get fluent. It works. It does work, guys. So this is what you can do to with the kids. It's if you're to just put on a certain language in the background, and you have to have the child hear it all the time and get exposed to it a bunch of times. Over time, the child will be able to speak the language over time, right? So, but with adults, we just don't have that. So yeah, guys, that's the main difference between how a child learns language and how an adult learns language.